What will you think about if you are drowning? Good memories or bad ones? He personally will not think about either one, because Noah barely remembers his own name. There was nothing but darkness. But then he saw light and felt as if his existence was being controlled like a puppet. The worlds flew past as if in a fog. His soul plunged into countless lives, but each of them rejected him, and this cycle repeated itself endlessly. He was a lost soul looking for a vessel. He was reborn time after time, until he failed and it escaped. He drank from this flask. Noah fell to the ground. He couldn't find a body that could accommodate him, and couldn't understand what was happening here. The only thing he understood was that he was alive. Noah was indeed alive, and what's more, he had the body of an adult man. He felt a huge relief. They called him Noah, and he remembered fragments of his past life, but it was all mixed up in his head. The man couldn't understand who he was and what was that nasty taste on his tongue. Had the guy who was the owner of this body just drunk poison? Noah read the note that the guy left and realized that his name was VERMIL, and the liquid in the flask was a healing potion, but it seemed to kill him rather than cure him. This guy definitely had enemies. Noah looked around and saw dead creatures around him that looked somewhat like monkeys from Earth. And then, they were too small to make such a huge wound in VERMIL's chest. He hoped that the creature that had made such a wound was already far away from here. Suddenly he saw an evil creature in front of him, which rushed to attack. Noah ran away and wondered what world he had been reborn into. He could not afford to run away like a coward. He decided to fight and turn to face the enemy. Noah threw his hand forward and realized that he had magic. However, he was immediately mortally wounded by the creature that attacked him. This monkey came up to his body and stared at him greedily. Noah's soul watched this from above. It was very offensive to die so quickly after being reborn. He couldn't even remember what happened after his previous life. Noah always believed that there was something after death, but he didn't think that he would have to stand in a very long line there too. Queues for something. It was also very boring here, and he began to see different things. All he could do while standing in this line was fantasize and think about his life. Of course, it wasn't great because he never got married or had children. He didn't even age gracefully. All he had was a useless education, although he loved teaching children music, and these were moments he never wanted to forget. But fate irritates him, and the very job he loved forced his fellow teachers to give him sick leave so he wouldn't get fired. But it still didn't affect anything. Years, centuries, millennia passed, and he lost track of time. The only thing he did was take another step when the line moved. It was an endless monotony until Noah reached the end. Fate awaited him, and Noah Vines died at the age of 26. He was an authority for his 86 students and was the subject of many prayers. Noah felt relieved when he knew this. At least his life had not been wasted. He asked the girl who told him this if she was God, and it turned out that she was Rebirth, one of the many goddesses of reincarnation. She told Noah to drink from the well of the water of life, so that he would lose the memories of his past life and continue on to the next. Noah was not happy about this. He did not want to forget everything. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the clear sky of this world. Noah couldn't believe that something like this could happen in the afterlife. A black warrior descended from the sky with a weapon in his hand. He addressed the goddess Rebirth, calling her a beautiful flower, and stated that he missed her. The goddess was surprised that he came back again. It seems he likes to lose. She attacked the black warrior and the battle began. Noah thought with horror. What could happen to him if he died after death? He didn't even want to know the answer to this question. He understood that the world around him was falling apart, and he urgently needed to get out of here. Rebirth advised the black warrior to try harder if he wanted her to start fighting him more seriously. The warrior replied that since this was her wish, he would be happy to fulfill her request. They came to blows, and Noah saw the goddess cut off her opponent's left hand, and the young man decided that the only way out of here was to drink the water that the goddess offered him. He didn't have time to worry about losing his memories. Noah couldn't just stand here doing nothing. He was tired of waiting for his life to begin. He's already fed up with all this. He threw himself into a well of water. Eternal death would be better than being forced to wander here endlessly. Noah felt like he was flying somewhere, and then he felt that he was alive again and was among the dead monkeys, completely naked. Noah died over and over again. Tens and hundreds of times, everything became like a fog, and each death was similar to the previous one. And every time he returned and found himself at that flask, it was agony, but it was still better than that damned never-ending line, and at some point Noah managed to get Vermil's things back. Only the magic never returned, and he could still feel it inside him, hidden in the corners of his clouded mind, and with death came experience. Noah noticed that the monkeys always used the same attacks. and with each death he learned little by little how to fight them. He noticed how they prepared themselves before jumping and how their eyes betrayed their movements. Their attacks could be predicted by the movement of their paws, and although he was not stronger or faster than them, he was not going to waste these lives in vain. He waited in this line for millennia and his patience snapped. They were not playing the same game. It didn't matter how many times the monkeys killed him. The main thing was that he killed them once. The academy students flew on swords over the forest. Noah saw them and asked for help, explaining that he was lost. He was slightly surprised that these guys could easily move around the air on flying swords. They asked Noah what happened to him, but he couldn't tell the truth because he didn't know what Vermil was doing there and who he was. Noah told the guys that he was injured and also that he was hit hard on the head by a giant monkey, and all his memories were messed up. All he knew about himself was his name, Vermil. The young men looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. Here Noah took out of his pocket the tag that he had received along with Vermil's clothes and showed it to his new acquaintances, who determined that he was a teacher in arbitration. The boys told the teacher to stand on the other side of the flying sword and volunteered to take him to the arbitration. The guy who offered to help Noah introduced himself and said that his name was Frederick. He asked to hold on tight during the flight, because he did not want to deal with a dead professor of arbitration. Noah decided that if Vermil was a professor, people must have known who he was, and the person who tried to kill him might even have been someone he knew. He needs to be careful. It seems like he's in no less danger now than he was in the forest. And now he doesn't even know who his enemies are. They soon arrived in the city of Arbitrage, flying up to the building of one of the greatest runic academies on the continent. Noah thought that, despite the danger, this situation could be ideal. Because in a real academy, he could blend in with the crowd and start learning magic. He just needed to avoid unnecessary attention, hiding behind his sudden amnesia. He shouldn't worry. If anyone could help him, it would be the people from the academy. Either that or they would discover he was a fake, and then he would be turned into a lab rat forever. Then a man appeared on the steps of the entrance to the academy and said that he had heard that Vermil had returned. Noah told him that he could not answer properly because he had hit his head so hard that everything was now mixed up. And the man asked if he really did not even remember him, to which Noah suggested that he was a healer. The man replied that he would take his answer as a no, because Vermil had simplified his role in a terribly ridiculous way. He reminded him that his name was Richard, and he specialized in healing runes. Richard placed his palm on Noah's chest and began to study him. Noah wondered anxiously if he would reveal that he was not the real Vermil. Richard stated that after examining his body, he could say with certainty that it was not a demon, but a man. But his mind was clouded. He expressed confidence that everything would fall into place after rest, because this is the best cure for amnesia. And Noah wondered if he would be able to say that the former Magnus Vernal was dead. Richard stated that only time would determine whether Vermil would recover or not, and Noah realized that the man hated the professor very much, and perhaps it was he who gave him the poison. Meanwhile, Richard thanked Frederick for delivering Magnus to the academy and promised that he would make sure his efforts were rewarded. Then, he told Noah that he would notify the headmaster of his return and volunteered to escort the professor to his room. When they reached the door with Magnus Vermil's nameplate, Richard asked the professor for the key. Realizing that Noah didn't have it, he declared that this meant they were canceling the old one. When Noah entered the professor's office, he saw incredible disorder and Richard said that he would send someone to check on him, but until then he should be here. When the doctor left, Noah could not shake the feeling that he knew more than he had decided to show him. He walked over to the desk and saw the key that Vermil had left there for some reason. Noah Vines sat down in the professor's chair and said that he was now a teacher again, and there should be no difficulties. And then he came across a note for Vermil's student. From the looks of it, this Vermil was a nasty guy. No wonder someone wanted to kill him. From the papers, it could be concluded that Vermil was a teacher of magic. Noah grabbed his head. How was he supposed to teach others when he himself didn't understand anything? Suddenly, someone knocked loudly on the office door and a man of heroic build, who called himself Braden, appeared before Noah's eyes and asked what had happened to him. Noah replied that he had received a serious blow to the head and lost some of his memories. Braden reminded the professor that he had warned him how severe the memory loss was, and that the Linwicks would be furious if he got injured but didn't get the proper treatment. Noah decided that at least the man didn't hate him, which was a good thing considering his build. While Braden reminded him that Vermil had a class in an hour, Braden informed him that he would be out of town for a few months and would no longer be able to cover for him. But Noah decided that he didn't want another person poking around in his head. Noah calmed the giant down and said that he was fine, and it was just a little memory loss. He just needed to remind him where his class was. and Braden said with annoyance that it was Building G, Room 100, and he shouldn't be late because if his students failed the exam, it would reflect badly on the Linwicks. Noah thanked Braden and assured him that he would not be late for anything in the world. Then his gaze fell on a newspaper page with a headline about a group of face snatchers. This reminded Noah of something, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. Noah hurried to class in Building G. He was already late, and the building was some kind of labyrinth. Noah didn't meet a single soul on his way to his class, but he finally arrived there. He looked around carefully, trying to find something useful here, and heard footsteps. Someone was coming here. A girl entered the classroom and asked him curiously what he was doing there. Noah replied that he was there to teach a lesson, and then he saw a guy who also entered the classroom and asked the girl, calling her Isabel, who was she talking to? The boy noticed the teacher and was surprised to note that he had never seen Vermil appear in class before. And Noah was surprised that the students were actually his age. The boy asked Isabel if their teacher realized that the lesson had already started 40 minutes ago. Noah decided that he could handle the pair and offered to give the students a wonderful lesson, and Isabel asked him point blank what he was trying to portray. Noah apologized for not seeming like himself to them because he had been hit on the head and was now experiencing minor memory loss. Then he invited the students to sit down and asked them to answer all his questions, surprised that the rest of the students had not yet come to class. Todd, that was the guy's name, explained that the whole class was just the two of them, and there was no one else. It was just them stuck here with him. Noah remarked that 2 was better than 0 and asked them to sit down, and Todd asked in surprise if he was seriously going to teach them, since they were of the same rank as him, and he only had this position because he was a member of the Linwick family. Noah decided that the Linwick family must be very powerful, and Isabel asked the professor to just give them an automatic pass, and they would not interfere with him. It was better to leave everything as it was before. Noah replied that he may not be as talented, but he has experience that they don't have. He has time until the end of the lesson, and whether they like it or not, he intends to teach them. And Todd asked the professor with interest what he was going to teach them. The previous time, he seemed to have seduced a student, and Isabel added that she was one of his students. The professor was not even fired after that. Noah reminded the students that he was their teacher, and they didn't have to like him, but they had to treat him with respect, even though he knew in his heart that Vermil was a real jerk. Noah invited the students to talk about the runes. He asked the students what it was, and Ted indignantly asked the professor if he really considered them children. The runes allow them to collect energy and use magic, and everyone knows this. And Isabel added that the professor has completely lost his mind. Noah said, with a serious expression, that it was now clear to him that none of them had any idea what they were talking about. They had just given the most vague and useless definition possible because he hadn't asked what the runes did. He had asked what they were. Isabel asked the professor what he meant. Noah asked if they knew what the runes were used for, what they were in themselves. They couldn't fully use a thing if they didn't know exactly how it worked. Todd admitted that he didn't know, and Isabel asked the teacher if it mattered, and Noah replied that they should talk a little about magic. What can it do? The girl replied that magic could do anything, and Noah asked if there really was nothing that the rune couldn't do. Isabel replied that he could only use one rune at a time, and it could not resurrect the dead. Noah said that magic does have its limits, and the beginning of understanding comes from knowing the most fundamental elements, and runes can definitely bring a person back to life. However, no one knows what they really are, and Todd asked the professor irritably, "He doesn't claim to know it himself, does he?" Noah replied that anyone who says they know exactly how something works is either a liar or delusional. There is always something that can be learned. Noah drew a rune on the board, and Todd asked if it was his rune, and the professor confirmed it. The students couldn't believe that he just drew it, and the professor explained that this rune was in his book, and he himself thought that, obviously, he shouldn't have done this for some reason. Todd stood up from his seat and asked incredulously if he was just going to let them see her for free, and Isabel suggested that the teacher had actually hit his head really badly. Noah explained that a teacher's job is to teach his students, but he decided that he needed to be more careful about asking his next questions. He asked the students if runes also have ranks and what makes a rune a minor rune. Todd lit a magical fire on his palm and replied that they couldn't contain that much magic, and they were less controllable than the great runes. Greater runes are simply stronger. But this does not mean that the minor runes are weak, and Todd demonstrated the power of his rune. Noah thanked Todd for the demonstration and said that it seemed like their definition had expanded a lot. Now, could any of them give a more precise definition of what a rune was? When he didn't get an answer, he said that it was good, because realizing that they didn't know something was the first step, but that didn't mean they had to stop looking for an answer. What else did the rune do? Todd said that they can be combined and also imbue things with their power. And Noah invited the students to think about what the rune consists of and give him the answer in the next lesson. He decided to move on to the most important question. Now Noah turned to Isabel and asked how she activates her runes. The girl replied that you need to imagine yourself diving inside yourself. Then the professor suggested finding out if they were not sure of their answers, then whether they were sure of what they were talking about. He suggested looking at their runes again and telling them what would happen. And he decided that when they finished, he would do the same. The students agreed, and Noah decided it was time to feel the magic. But where could his runes be? Could they be inside his soul? And he has a lot of experience, because he himself was a soul, so it shouldn't be very difficult. He had already used magic. It was like meditation. He remembered the runes from the book, which now came to him. It looks like he has 5 wind runes and 2 ash runes. Todd mentioned combining runes, and it seems like combining notes into one full chord in music. Noah grabbed his head with both hands. It was another rune. It was the 8th rune that reminded him of something. She reminded him of that warrior from the afterlife. A few hours after the lesson, Noah forced himself to focus and imagine magic. He was pleased to realize that his runes were working again. But all energy, even magic, has limits, and soon his capabilities ran out. Noah went to the library and the place looked very presentable, unlike his classroom. He wondered if he would get free coffee here. Noah went up to the librarian and told him he needed some books on runes, some basics, entry level. By chance, their conversation was overheard by a red-haired girl who, turning to VERMIL, said that the Linwick family seemed to have fallen much lower than she thought, since he was looking for such books. Can't he find something so basic with his family's resources? Noah, of course, didn't know who this girl was, and replied that it would be wasteful to use the Linwick family's resources on such a trifle. And why waste their time when he could find these books here? The girl noted that this was stupid, but even he was not so stupid as to continue banging his head against the wall, because he was looking for books for beginners. She added that it was a pitiful sight. Considering the fact that he was a first-rank professor, maybe he would find a new way to lift women's skirts. After which the girl used magic on him, which threw the professor 2 meters away. VERMIL really was a piece of shit, since everyone hated him. Noah didn't know what to answer and said that it was an old bad hobby, and he was looking for a more useful occupation. Moxie, that was the girl's name, replied that there were no fools ready to buy into his fairy tales. He was a real disgrace to his family, and he fit in perfectly with it. Noah realized that Moxie hated him too, and noticed a face-snatching guide in her hands. He would say she was a fool, but based on what he knows about VERMIL, that's the treatment he deserves. Maybe Moxie was one of the people who tried to kill him. Noah rose to his feet and asked the librarian about the books again. Having received what he wanted, Noah locked himself in his office to better understand how his runes worked. Something told him that the huge rune that appeared to him was definitely not normal. However, drawing attention to it would be stupid, and anyway, why did VERMIL have so many crappy lesser wind runes? It seemed like he was from some semi-influential family, and therefore his runes should be better. Or were they really just for lifting up girls' skirts? Apart from that giant, he has 5 wind runes and 2 ash runes. Even though these 2 are both windy, they feel different. One of them is not saturated. If you compare it, it's as if each of them were a bucket or a separate source of energy. The more they are filled with energy, the stronger they are. And killing monsters makes the bucket bigger and fills it with water. This is probably what he felt in the forest when he finally killed the monkey. Even though the energy of the ash runes is almost at 0, it is still more powerful than the almost fully charged wind runes. It turns out that small runes are like small buckets in their own way, which will always remain so small. This means that if he wants to become stronger, he needs to replace these small runes, then fill them with energy, and figure out how to combine them. Noah thought happily about how nice it was to have a goal other than just not dying. He felt like the wind rune had refilled his energy reserves, and decided to try something new. He placed a large stack of paper in front of him and raised it into the air. Noah focused on the object and used magic. He managed to cut a stack of paper in half right in the air, like with a razor. Now wind magic was clear, and someday, perhaps, he would even be able to fly if he studied it perfectly. But he couldn't even feel the ash rune when he tried to use it. She simply didn't respond, and Noah decided to just focus on what was already working for now. Suddenly, he had an idea. Maybe he could clean the office using wind magic? He tried. Noah succeeded, and he thought that now that he knew what to look for, he could feel one of his wind runes running out as he used it. And now it was time for the next stage of his master plan. The professor went home to take a relaxing bath. After that, he decided to see what was in this Vermil's closet and found that the professor was constant in his clothes. Noah was brushing his teeth before going to bed when there was a loud knock on the door. He decided that he shouldn't open it, and then the uninvited guests would think that he was sleeping. However, they continued to knock on the door and it finally swung open from a strong blow. Noah hid behind the closet and someone entered the room, walking heavily. Suddenly, the man slipped on scattered sheets of paper and fell to the floor with a crash. Noah came out from behind his hiding place and saw with horror that it was the woman who had slipped on his papers, hitting her head, and it appeared that she had no pulse. She was dead, and Noah assumed that everyone might think he had killed her. Noah heard a rustling sound and looked around. It was Moxie, to whom he told that everything didn't look as it seemed to her. Noah told Moxie, armed with his sword, that he understood her dislike for him, and it seemed she had her reasons for it. However, she must believe him. He did not kill this woman, but she fell herself. Moxie checked the dead woman's pulse and asked Noah if he suddenly decided to practice his jokes, but she's still impressed that Vermil managed to kill him. Did he really train? And Noah wondered why Moxie was acting like everything was okay. He asked the girl to explain to him what had just happened and who this person was. Moxie replied that, apparently, he really is an idiot because in front of him is a real face stealer. At Noah's puzzled look, Moxie asked him if he hadn't read the warning that was sent out to everyone. The girl poured herself a glass of whiskey and asked the professor how he knew that the creature should be killed, since he had no idea that it was a face stealer. Noah assumed that since it was a face stealer, it meant he stole someone's body, and Moxie confirmed this, adding that it was probably some poor maid. Noah hopefully asked Moxie if there was a chance she survived, but the girl replied that she was already dead, since they can only capture dead bodies. Noah decided that he should be more careful with the bodies he left behind after he died, and Moxie thoughtfully said that she didn't understand why the face stealer came here in the first place. They were usually attracted to magic, but no one trained in their rooms because you could accidentally destroy everything here. Then Moxie asked the professor to keep everything that happened between them, because if anyone found out that the face thief had slipped past her and was killed by Vermil, she would be reminded of it for the rest of her life. Noah agreed, but said that it would not be free. He wanted to ask her some questions because he had recently been hit on the head and his memory was mixed up, and there were gaps in his knowledge. Moxie agreed to listen and gave him 10 minutes to do so. Noah asked the girl why there were monsters at school. Shouldn't it be safe here? And Moxie replied that it was safer here, but not safe. Face snatchers are a new problem for them, but far from the worst they have faced. Monsters want their runes as much as they want monsters' runes. Noah realized that the girl meant the energy they get by killing monsters. Moxie confirmed these words and added that the power contained in the runes works both ways. Otherwise, there would be no point. And Noah concluded that then they can take the runes from the monsters. Moxie corrected him and said that they couldn't do that unless they were master runes. Some seeds appeared in her palms, which she threw onto the dead body of the face stealer. Moxie asked Noah in surprise how he couldn't know that. He was asking questions that only a child could ask. He replied that all his old memories had simply become clouded. Noah was surprised and delighted to see that Moxie's magical seeds had completely engulfed the face thief's body, and he wondered what else this amazing girl was capable of. Moxie looked deep into Noah's eyes and said that if she didn't know better, she would have thought that he was also one of the face stealers, because even they were smarter than him, and asked him to ask the next question. Noah wasn't sure what exactly the girl had mentioned as a master rune, but that huge rune in his soul certainly didn't look normal, so he asked if there were any monsters with master runes nearby. Moxie hoped that there weren't any nearby. They all varied in strength, but the strongest of them could level the arbitration to the ground. The closest one was a Hell Reaper, and even he would smear him like paste. His strength is at the level of the second rank, and with the master rune, it even approaches the third. Noah moved on to the third question and asked the girl how it was that their books didn't say a word about how to make new runes. Moxie replied that if the Linviks had figured out how to do this, then he should let her know. How could he ask such questions when his grimoires had all his research written down? Noah decided he needed to take a closer look at the grimoire, the Book of Spells. He asked Moxie if it meant that you couldn't just learn the runes by drawing them and studying them more closely, and the girl tiredly told him that the runes were vessels, but power was what these vessels stored, and, unfortunately for the runes to store power, power was needed. Noah nodded understandingly and said that it was like a starting impulse, because it was impossible to start moving without using energy. It was like starting a car battery. Moxie agreed with this statement and added that forming a rune in his soul requires both the energy of the rune and its design, so they are kept secret. The combinations of runes are guarded even more strictly. Knowing which runes can be combined without destroying one's soul is incredibly valuable. Noah decided to ask one last question, if she knew who didn't like him, and the girl replied that it would be much easier to list the people who liked VERMIL. Noah nodded his head and stated that he had no more questions and he promised to leave this little incident between them. They shook hands, and Moxie said she thought he was going to ask her how to cope with next month's exams. Noah muttered that he would be fine and decided that it was another item on his growing list of things he needed to explore. As she left the professor's house, Moxie warned him not to say a word to anyone about the face snatchers, because if he had forgotten what happened when she was angry, then she didn't advise him to do anything to find out. The next day, Noah went to the transport cannon to understand how magical public transportation works. The cannon was 30 stories high, and Noah thought that if he sat and waited, he wouldn't get any stronger. He stood in line and took the elevator up to the 30th floor. The owner of this gun, Tim, greeted the teacher and asked where to send him this time. And although Noah didn't think it was the safest way to get anywhere, he asked to be sent to the Burnt Acres. The manager warned him that he would definitely return the professor back within 24 hours. Noah said his last trip left him with a serious concussion. He thought that VERMIL had lost his life because of this, but what was he doing there? The owner of the cannon assured that the journey was completely safe, and there had never been any problems with this mechanism. He told the professor to get into the capsule because there was a long line waiting outside. At the last moment, Noah became scared, but the manager said that he always enjoyed this part of the trip. Noah consoled himself with the thought that even if this thing killed him, at least he would be resurrected. But maybe he should have left his flask there. The cannon fired and Noah's body cringed. The Linwick estate was majestic and luxurious. In the corridor of a huge and beautiful castle, Braden met his father. Braden reported that he had done everything as he had asked, but VERMIL had been acting very strangely. His father expressed regret that he was an improvement from how he usually behaved, and Braden suggested that perhaps he was simply nearing the end of his mission, and his father expressed doubts about that. He exclaimed that VERMIL would serve his purpose both in life and in death. Noah, meanwhile, was flying over the burnt acres. Finally, he felt the ground beneath him. He rose to his feet and saw that the place was still as charred as when he left it. Noah decided that he had nothing to fear. He could always endure the pain, and the gun would return him back in 24 hours. By the time he's done here, these monsters will learn to fear him. Here he can practice without fear. The main thing is to go a little deeper into the forest, because this place is essentially abandoned. But first, Noah climbed a tree to calmly look at VERMIL's spellbook. He hoped to find something more interesting there than the wind runes. If he was going to charge his runes, then he needed to charge them correctly. And VERMIL, by the way, had collected an impressive collection. The book would probably contain a whole 100. There was a fire rune here, a plant rune. The rune of darkness seemed too pretentious to him. Water, light, electricity, metal, none of this suited him. He needed something unique, something that would allow him to use his knowledge from Earth. Naturally, he didn't know how to create nuclear weapons, and he didn't remember the formulas of chemical compounds because he was a music teacher. Noah searched the book for the great rune of vibration, which he found there. VERMIL wrote off this rune too early. With sufficiently strong vibration, it is possible to create small and large earthquakes, as well as resonant vibrations. Now the phrase "raised to the ground" took on new meaning for him, and it seemed to him that he had finally found his style. Noah was deciding which of the runes he would now replace with the vibration rune. The ash runes are much stronger than his other runes, but he still doesn't even know how to use them, so Noah decided to start by replacing one of the wind runes. And then you need to rebuild it into something better. Noah tried it and realized that he almost succeeded. After some time, he managed to compose a new rune. She had almost no energy, so for now he had to rely only on wind runes, and now it was time to look for some monkeys to carry out a little revenge. Soon, in one of the forest clearings, Noah discovered a couple of monsters. He calmly called out to the monkey that was gnawing on the corpse of its fellow. Noah used magic. The monster's head was separated from its body, as if it had been cut off by the sharp blade of a sword. Noah noticed that the energy of this monkey had hardly refilled the rune charges, and he really hoped that it was not an endangered species, because he planned to exterminate a considerable number of them. Noah climbed the tree again to pick up his next victim. He had never fought a whole group of monkeys before, and he just saw 3 of them, among which was one similar to the one that killed him. The moment for the real test had arrived, and Noah carefully crept up to the group, who were communicating with each other in an incomprehensible language. The idea of their intelligence was unpleasant to Noah, and it took him a full minute to get it into his head. But he did not forget that these bastards had killed him first. Noah used wind magic against the group, which immediately killed two monkeys. Noah emerged from the ambush and asked the remaining individual if these two were his friends, or if he was just going to eat them. The monster lunged at Noah, and he realized that hitting a moving target was much more difficult. The beast quickly approached Noah, and he saw how the monster made the same movements as the individual who had killed him before. Noah knew that now he would hit him with both hands. He could predict the movement of this monkey and defeat him. However, he wasn't fast enough to react fast enough, and the monster killed him. Noah thought that he needed to continue his training. The last thing Noah saw was this disgusting monster starting to eat his face. Noah already knew that after each death his head would start to split, and until it passed he could not use magic. It seemed the headache lasted for about 12 hours. He saw the monster and decided to try again. Noah saw the monkey rush at him and was about to grab him from the sides. He now knew that there would be a blow from above, and then the monster would make a horizontal attack, but the monkey would die before it could complete it. The monster's head actually rolled on the ground. Noah noticed that they all fought the same way, but that made his job easier. It's time to go back. The owner of the gun was surprised that the boy was so badly hurt. Noah reassured the old man and said that he was not hurt, but simply forgot that he was supposed to return so soon. He expressed his joy that he had survived and advised him to contact him again if he decided to travel. Noah decided to take a spare set of clothes with him next time and, having changed, went to class with his students. Todd and Isabel were late, but they arrived earlier than they had the previous time, and Noah realized that they were betting on whether he would show up for the second lesson or not. Noah decided he had missed something by going to Burnt Acres. Isabel told the professor that classes were held every 2 days, and it was supposed to be yesterday, but the teacher didn't show up. They came here to hang out because rarely anyone comes to this room. Noah apologized for ruining all their plans, but since he and they were here, why don't they have a class to make up for yesterday? The professor asked the students how they were doing with their homework, and Todd said that nothing came to mind and he simply suppressed his stress with food, while Isabel asked VERMIL to finally tell them the answer to the question of what runes are. Noah smiled and stated that he himself did not know the answer to that question. If it were that simple, they would already have the answer. That's exactly what they have to figure out for themselves. Isabel frowned and asked the professor, "Then why waste time making them think about it?" Noah thoughtfully replied that time spent thinking was never wasted, and now they should discuss with them why it was important to have good runes, since you could only have 7 runes for each level. He asked the question, so what happens when they move to the next rank, and Todd answered that when they combine all 7 of their runes into one stronger one, if it works, then he can handle absorbing a large number of runes of that rank. This way you can go from a general type, like fire or wind, to more specialized ones like ice fog or something else. Isabel added that if this combination does not work, the runes may break, and then he will be crippled until he heals his soul, and this can take years, which is why the working combinations of runes are so well guarded, and the intentions of the person combining the runes also have an effect. Noah noted that this all sounded logical. The VERMIL family most likely had quite a collection, although Noah didn't think it would be a good idea to ask them for help. After 30 minutes, the professor finished the class and asked them to summarize what they had learned. Runes are something like buckets of water, only the water is the energy they fill them with. Small runes are smaller buckets, and great ones are larger. And when they completely fill all 7 buckets, they can combine them into one better bucket. Todd and Isabel looked at the teacher in surprise. Noah quickly gathered his briefcase and said that they had already discussed enough, and he did not want to overload anyone, and they would continue the discussion when they met again. Isabel thoughtfully asked VERMIL how hard he had hit his head, since he now looked completely different from his former self. Noah replied that it didn't matter, since he really liked the current one, and Todd added that they almost respected him. The professor reminded the students that the class would take place in 2 days, at the same time. The students said goodbye to the teacher and left the classroom. Noah, remembering something, shouted to them to prepare well for the next lesson. He needed a break, and maybe the fatigue was a side effect of his many deaths. But he couldn't look up the symptoms online now because he wasn't here. 2 days later, Noah was sitting in his office, and there were still a couple of hours left before classes, but his head was hurting badly from the magic. He even had some visions. Maybe it's just paranoia from knowing that VERMIL's killers are still at large. It suddenly seemed to him that the figure of a monkey flashed in the window opening, or perhaps it was just a trick of the light. And Noah decided to see for now whether yesterday's training had led to anything. He drew a rune and wished that the energy would have time to accumulate in it. Noah barely managed to hold back the things on the table as they began to move. He didn't expect it to work at all, and if the vibration and wind runes work well, then he was using the ash rune incorrectly. Noah placed a candle and several objects, including a piece of paper, on the laboratory dish. He lit a candle and held the paper up to it. Noah used magic on a pile of ash and realized that he couldn't create ash with magic, but he could control it. But why didn't he realize that before? Runes don't create their elements, they control them, but I wonder how much more powerful are the greater runes compared to the lesser ones. Maybe the difference isn't that big. If he can control ash, it's still ash, and it doesn't cut things the same way wind does for some reason. It was probably due to the amount of energy stored in the runes. So Vermil kept a few weak wind runes and found it easier to use them than to work with more powerful ones. It was good that he had only gotten rid of one wind rune, otherwise he would have lost his reliable way to fight, but he still couldn't figure out what it was. It would probably be stupid to try to do anything with it. He doesn't even know how this huge rune works. Maybe he can use it with a simple touch? As soon as Noah touched the rune, he immediately saw that black warrior in front of him. It was a vision. He stood with his weapon in front of the chained monster. He then swung his blade, ripping open his stomach. Then many runes appeared in the sky, including a huge rune, insectoid armor. Noah thought that if he remembered this, he could repeat it. This warrior didn't just destroy them. He divided them into parts. The rune showed what it does. It divides into parts. The rune crushed the monster into its components, and not only the monster, it can also separate other runes. Now he can separate them too. Separating and combining runes is like baking a cake. It is impossible to separate ingredients that have already been mixed, but isn't that exactly what this rune allows him to do? He could restore the egg and get the original ingredient back, untainted by the rest of the mixture. Now he could combine and separate runes without thinking about the combination. He could try this an unlimited number of times. That Noah noticed that he was already late for class. He ran into the classroom, thinking that he shouldn't experiment with separation now anyway. This rune almost turned him into a bug. He would have to be much stronger to even attempt to control it. And yet, if the combination was the key to a unique form of magic, then he had just found himself a master key. Noah suddenly came back to lock the door. He didn't want any incidents with the face stealer. Todd and Isabel were already in class and angrily informed the professor that he was late. Noah apologized and said that it was his job to be late, but he was here now. Todd asked the teacher impatiently what their plan was for today. Energy saturation, possible combinations, or the meaning of life. Noah replied that he hadn't planned anything that big. He just wanted to go on a little hike today. When Todd found out that they were going to the training ground, he was outraged, because the professor didn't even know the answers to his own questions. How was he going to train them? Noah calmly replied that he was not going to do anything himself, but the two of them would spar. Todd suggested that this was another excuse for Vermil to avoid teaching them, and Isabel said that he was simply afraid of losing to her. Todd reminded the girl that they had a draw in their last match, and Isabel said that then he should have no problem getting another draw. Noah praised the boys for their fighting spirit. The opponents stood opposite each other. Each of them was equipped with a shield icon that created a barrier, protecting against a certain amount of magical damage. These icons only worked in the training grounds. Todd asked Isabel if she was ready to fight, and she replied that the most harm he could do was burn their dinner again. The young man noticed that she really did look like dinner, so he used fire magic and said that he wanted to end this instantly. Isabel materialized a sword from her body and suggested that Todd attack first, and Noah couldn't understand how his students even used magic without the appearance of runes. The duel has begun. Isabel told her opponent that he was wasting his time swinging his fists because they were still missing their target. Todd threw a fireball at her and asked her what she thought about accuracy now. The girl deftly avoided his attack and stated that this attempt was also so-so. The battle between the professor's two students continued. Noah saw that Todd had managed to deprive the girl of her sword, but for some reason she still continued to run towards him. Then Isabel created another sword and attacked her opponent. Todd ended up lying on the ground, and Isabel asked him if he was going to call it a draw again, and he replied that he couldn't stand her magic. He raised himself up on his elbow and told the girl that he was almost able to defeat her. He even knocked out her sword. Isabel stubbornly stated that she had thrown it away on purpose, but Todd disagreed and continued to argue. Noah slowly clapped his hands and stated that it was amazing. Since he thought they could barely do magic, it seemed like he was worrying about them preparing for the exam for nothing. The students looked at the teacher in confusion, and Isabel asked, "He doesn't mean that they will have to come to it, does he?" Noah expressed bewilderment at how they planned to pass it if they didn't show up for the exam, and Isabel reminded him that they had an agreement, and he had only started teaching them for real a week ago. Todd told the professor that they would get what he asked for, because they had agreed on this at the beginning of the semester, and Noah realized that Vermil was going to take a bribe from these students. Every new fact about this asshole made him hate him more and more. Noah replied that now the plans had changed and they would act differently. Then Noah asked them to remind him what would happen on the exam, and they were horrified. How could the professor not know what would happen there? Because they would have to kill a slasher. Noah shrugged and asked them if that was all the exam was about. If they fight like they did today, they shouldn't have any problems. Of course, these monkeys are fast, but at the same time predictable. Isabel noted that it was easy for him to say, since they would be the ones fighting them. And Todd suggested that when the professor was taking the exam, he probably also gave someone a bribe, just as they were now trying to give it to him. Noah replied that he had killed slashers and quite a lot of them. The students didn't believe the professor, and Isabel said the only reason he would confront them was if his family kept them on a leash and he fought. Noah closed his eyes and thought that he really missed the times when his students respected him, but he wouldn't let their teacher let him down again, even if he wasn't the one who actually let them down. Noah opened his eyes and told his students that they would practice for the next few weeks, and if they were still not confident as the exam approached, he would allow them to cheat, even without a bribe. So they made an agreement. Isabel told Todd that they had no choice if they wanted to kill the slasher, and if they wanted to become stronger, they didn't need to cheat anymore. The girl turned to Vermil and said that they had time before the exam, and if he didn't convince them by then, their deal was off. But he shouldn't flatter himself, he was still a terrible professor. A few hours later, Noah was already at the place where the slashers lived. After taking out 3, he found out that he could use magic without showing his runes. He just had to imagine them in his head. And if he could kill slashers that easily, then Todd and Isabel really had nothing to worry about. Once you've completely learned their attack list, there's nothing to surprise the monkeys with.
이거 해. 아, 이- 아,
Suddenly, a huge stone flew at Noah's head. As he fell, he saw a monster monkey between the trees. She walked up to the dying Noah and greedily licked the blood running down his hand with her long tongue. His soul soared above his dead body, and he could not understand what was happening. A huge monkey held his body, and although he was dead, the pain was still felt. Noah was sleeping in his bed. Morning came, and the birds were making such a noise outside the window, as if they were hammering nails into his skull. He pulled the blanket over his head and wondered why every time he died his head hurt more and more. Maybe he died too often, or did he have a limit? Noah opened the window and chased away the annoying birds. He has become too self-confident. Whether these monkeys are predictable or not, they are still stronger than him. And while he may have an infinite chance to fight them, Todd and Isabel do not. And if they go after monkeys that throw rocks like the one that killed him, the boys will not survive and will not return from this fight. Runes, bloodthirsty monkeys keeping his students alive. There's so much he has to keep in mind. It would be better if he was reborn as a slime or some other creature. Noah suddenly felt like he was looking at a slasher through the mirror. He took a fighting stance and realized that there was no one in the room. Was he really going crazy? And who would have thought that the human mind on a psychological level is not sufficiently prepared for constant fighting and death? Noah felt like he needed a drink urgently, which he did, pouring some booze into a glass. He calmed down a little and decided to move on to the next question, although he didn't know which one. All questions were important. It was difficult to rank them in order of importance. Noah decided to start with a headache. After he died the last time, strange cracks appeared in the runes of his soul. Could this pain have something to do with it? It didn't look very good. There were a whole bunch of holes in his soul. They were huge, as he hadn't noticed them before, but suddenly he noticed that they were gradually tightening. It was nice to realize that the problem could solve itself. But from the looks of it, in his current state it'll take weeks for everything to be restored here. And Isabel said that this place is connected to his soul, so it should damage his soul every time he dies. So if he dies less often, then everything will return to normal. Almost all of these holes must have appeared during his first days in the burnt acres. If he had continued to die there, it could have been disastrous. It was good that he had figured it all out, and the first point from the list of questions could be crossed out. And apparently, he was doing great with the second point as well. His vibration rune had become stronger. Noah wasn't sure how much more it would take to fill it completely, but he was happy with the progress. It was much better than trying to survive as a teacher on Earth. The third item on the to-do list was a catch. He told Todd Isabel to train and spar for the next week to prepare for the trip to Scorched Acres, so he should have plenty of time. Only those throwers spoiled his plans a little, or to be more precise, the stones of those monkey throwers. He couldn't kill these monsters, and besides, at the moment when they were killing him, he was able to notice them only 2 times out of 4. Luckily, he'd only seen throwers deep in the burnt acres, so as long as he trained the boys on the edge of the forest, everything should be fine. With each death, he learned a little bit about how to fight the throwers, but at the same time his headache grew worse, but he could handle them. A week later, Noah decided that with the exam looming, he couldn't afford to relax because his students needed him. He had no intention of letting them down like VERMIL had. Noah came to class and found his students there, who did not expect him to arrive on time. And Isabel asked the professor with hope. Perhaps he understood everything and decided to cancel their agreement. Noah replied that the deal still stood and they needed to get going because they had a long day ahead of them. Todd asked the professor with annoyance why he suddenly decided to worry about their training. What had changed? Noah thought back to his disciples on Earth and thought that, frankly speaking, not much had changed. He just didn't have the chance to see them achieve everything. And again, having received such a chance, he could not miss it. He told Todd out loud that he was worried because it was his job. After that, they headed towards the transport gun. Noah greeted Tim and asked him to set the cannon on Scorched Acres. The old man returned the greeting and noted that he had now brought young people with him. The professor explained that he was conducting training with students before the exam. Tim set up the gun and told everyone to get inside. Todd felt sick just from the sight of the capsule. Todd was sure that where they were going they would find their death, and Isabel asked Noah how he had convinced them. The professor responded that their love of learning and self-development inspired them to take risks and find themselves. The girl said that he was blackmailing them, and Noah replied that these were just words. Tim pressed the red button. In Scorched Acres, students were horrified to see a slasher in a tree. Noah turned to Isabel and reminded her that she had bragged about her victories in battles. Now she could fight this monster. The girl decided that she really needed to try, or she would forever be known as a weakling. She convinced herself that this was just a stupid monkey. She materialized a plasma sword and moved towards the monster. Noah believed that she would be able to handle him without difficulty, but if not, he was ready to come to the rescue. The beast also rushed to attack the girl, but Isabel clearly didn't have time, so Noah used wind magic, dealing with the slasher, and told the girls that next time she would definitely be able to react to the monster's attack. Isabel exclaimed that the creature almost killed her, and Noah explained that it happened because she was not confident in her abilities. If she fought like in the arena, then she would not have had any problems. Todd noted that it was easy for him to say that, since they couldn't afford shields like rich kids like him. Noah, ask your disciples if they think he has this fancy shield. He took off all his clothes to show that it was missing, but Todd assumed it was in his pants. The students saw that their teacher didn't have a shield, and Isabel stated that then he was even more stupid than they imagined. Why did he even decide to come here without a shield? He was only a first rank. And what would happen if the monkey tried to kill them? Todd supported the girl and said that with this damn shield he at least had a chance to escape, but now if they ran into a slasher, he would simply kill them all. Noah replied that they thought it would be safer that way because if he had a shield, he would buy them time to escape, and the disciples agreed with this statement. Just then, an angry roar was heard in the forest, and Todd screamed hysterically that it was the end for them all. And Noah calmly declared that it was time for their first field lesson. He took a few steps forward, ordering his students to watch him closely. After that, he headed towards the huge slasher, stating that all of this would be on the exam. Looking at the attacking monster, Noah said that slashers, like everyone else in the forest, attack in the same ways. If they can predict them, they will certainly be able to win. The astonished students looked at the corpse of a huge animal that their teacher had actually killed. Noah returned to his students and said that they didn't need a shield unless they were going to get hit. Todd said it was his turn now, and Isabel said it was up to her to restore her reputation. Noah told his students that he was not teaching them to rely on instinct alone. Right now he was teaching them a pattern, how to read their opponent. Isabel concentrated and swung her sword, and Noah added that if they learned, they wouldn't need a shield for support at all. Life was a single run. Soon, they managed to kill the slasher, and this made the students happy. Isabel happily shared her impressions of how she dodged the monkey's claws. Todd echoed her, saying that the monster didn't stand a chance. He knew exactly what he was going to do. Noah confidently stated that if they continued like this, the moment they could afford shields, They would get used to fighting without them, which would be very useful to them, especially if everyone thought the same way as them. Ted shared his thoughts about spending the money on healing potions because that's what the professor spends the money his family gives him on. Noah thought about it and remembered that that guy Braden was also a Linwick. Could he have been the one who gave Vermil the poison? Todd patted the teacher on the shoulder and said confidently that, of course, he was spending them on this. Only someone who wanted to die would fight a slasher without a shield and healing potions. The professor replied that he had no desire to die, but he was not afraid of death itself. Fear helps. It is embedded in them for a reason. It preserves them, but at the same time it restrains them. If they listened to fear, they would never take risks. Therefore, he is not afraid of death, but on the contrary, he understands. Suddenly, Ted saw something and asked the teacher what it was, and in the distance Noah noticed the thrower. He immediately ordered his disciples to leave, told them to move along the road they had come by, and not to turn back, lest they be heard. They, holding hands, began to carry out the order of their teacher. Noah believed that he would be okay, and if he died now, Todd and Isabel would not survive either. Suddenly, Noah saw with horror that the thrower was not aiming at him at all. At the last moment, he managed to block the movement of the stone with his body. The professor, clutching the wound on his chest, fell. Isabel, seeing this, tried to go back, but Todd held her back. However, the girl broke free and rushed to help Vermil. Noah rose heavily to his feet and ordered Isabel and Todd to run. The professor saw a thrower a few meters away from him, ready to attack. Noah thought that when he came back to life, he probably wouldn't have magic, but he decided to do whatever it took to keep the monkey from getting to his students. He was determined to kill this creature no matter how many times he died here. Even though he has countless lives, this is his best chance to finish off this thrower. The only question is, how is he supposed to fight him? The monster does not allow you to get close to it, and its accuracy from such a distance leaves much to be desired. The thrower threw another stone at the man, but Noah expected it and managed to dodge it. He drew that rune, and now the monkey couldn't see him. The forest was illuminated by many lights and everything around shook. Todd and Isabel ran away and couldn't understand what was happening. It all felt like a strong earthquake. Noah no longer needed to see his enemy to fight him because he knew everything about him. He already saw his every movement. Noah even had his own theory about these monkeys, the reason why they all attack the same way and why they are drawn to him. There was only one detail he couldn't understand. Why, after so many attempts, was it impossible for him to foresee absolutely everything? But now he understands this too. Something is controlling them. Something is sending them here, to a place where they are not supposed to be. The monkey frantically picked up stones in its paws and threw them wherever it could. Noah used magic, but the thrower dodged it. Noah was attacked again. He lay on his back and thought that throwers never dodge like that. His wind runes have run out and he is now helpless. Feeling the paws on his neck, Noah hoped that he had at least bought enough time for his students to escape. He also clearly remembered how the monkey's eyes changed before its dodge and counterattack. It felt like someone else had taken control of the monkey. He couldn't be reborn anymore, but he still had one rune, and they were right in the forest which was full of ash. These were his last conscious actions, which were nevertheless crowned with success. And that voice and those eyes, perhaps, belonged to the hellish reaper. Noah looked around and realized with relief that he had succeeded in doing it. He had killed the thrower. Now it was time to find Todd and Isabel. Noah changed into the clothes he had hidden in advance, because the rest had been torn to shreds. Noah whispered that he was lucky. His disciples had escaped, and God forbid anyone should see him die and be resurrected. Noah felt incredibly tired and knew that he was no use now. But Todd and Isabel were strong enough to survive until the transport cannon transported them back. The professor leaned his back against the tree trunk and decided to take a little nap. When they returned, Tim seemed surprised that the professor was alive, and Isabel said with alarm in her voice that she clearly heard a stone hit Noah in the chest. How could he survive such a blow without a shield? Noah said that he was lucky and had a huge amount of healing potions, and Isabel guessed why the professor told them to buy them. Vermil asked his students what happened to them when they ran away, and Todd replied that they ran as fast as they could, following his orders, but one monkey saw them and tried to catch up. At this point, both students began to take credit for destroying the monkey, and Noah interrupted them, saying that the lesson was over and that they would meet in 2 days. Todd and Isabel looked at the departing professor with concern and expressed hope that Vermil was okay, because he really did save them. And Noah thought that he needed to quickly find a cure for this unbearable headache that was haunting him. Immortality could become a curse if someone realized that he was powerless after the resurrection. Although this is not even the worst that can happen, because with each death the hallucinations only get worse. Noah saw these monsters at every turn and in every corner, and now a huge monster thrower was moving towards him. Noah, thinking that someone might die because of this monkey, dealt him a crushing blow to the jaw. When the hallucination cleared, he saw that he had hit some student. People around witnessed Professor VERMIL hit the student, and Noah realized that it was not a monster at all, and that it was attacking a student whom it would have killed if he had not been protected by the shield. The student was of heroic build and was very surprised how the professor could break his shield with a simple blow. At this time, a man appeared who addressed the student, stating that it was worth leaving him for 1 hour, as he had already broken his shield, and all this happened within the walls of the arbitration. The big guy pointed his finger at Noah and told Professor Silvertide that he was the one who knocked him out. Noah decided that now he would be fired, or worse, arrested. So what would happen to Todd and Isabel? Silvertide looked at Noah and told the student that this man was a soldier. His eyes had seen combat, and he was lucky he didn't kill him. Someone who fights monsters can't afford to decide if they are friend or foe before they act. Noah introduced himself to the professor and gave his name. Silvertide approached a student named Tyler and asked him to apologize to Professor VERMIL. Tyler respectfully handed Noah the dropped suitcase and apologized. Noah, in turn, asked for forgiveness for the broken shield and hurried to leave this place. Professor Silvertide looked after him with curiosity. Noah sat down on the floor under his door and couldn't understand what was happening to him. He needed to find out. He believed that there had to be some kind of clue. Suddenly he saw this eye that appeared to him in the forest. Noah realized that all the hallucinations and damage to his soul happened because of him. At this time, Richard knocked on the door wanting to talk to VERMIL. Noah opened the door, and Richard stated that he was asked to check on his strange behavior, but on the way here he ran into Professor Silvertide, and Noah confirmed his acquaintance with him. Richard said he needed to have his mental state checked again. Attacking students was much worse than being a VERMIL. Noah replied that there was no need for that. It was just a misunderstanding and he was doing fine. Richard agreed with the professor, but said that he didn't like the fact that his father was paying attention to him just because he had the misfortune of treating him, and he hoped that even he was smart enough to avoid becoming interesting to him. Richard then handed him his last month's paycheck and explained that the school had asked him to bring it because VERMIL had not picked it up himself. He asked VERMIL to spare him the favor next time. He was no errand boy. And he also asked him to tell his paranoid father that he was not stupid enough to poke around in his offspring's head. Noah didn't understand whether Richard was warning him about something or threatening him. In any case, he had to be on his guard. A few days later, Noah's students were waiting patiently in the classroom for their teacher to arrive. Suddenly, they saw through the opening in the roof how VERMIL flew there on a flying sword. The teacher asked them to step aside because he intended to fly down now. The students fulfilled his request, and the professor stood on the sword. However, the flight turned into a disaster, and Noah fell with a crash to the auditorium floor. Todd and Isabel rushed towards him in alarm, and Noah, rising to his feet, said that he was learning to fly, but was still not used to the flying sword, but it was really cool. Here, Isabel handed the professor a huge bouquet of roses with an envelope inside. Noah confusedly asked the students what it was, and the girl replied that it was just flowers and a card for saving them. And Todd proudly added that the card was his idea. Noah was particularly touched by the text of the card, where Isabel admitted that perhaps not all Linwicks were bad and thanked him for teaching him. Noah told the disciples that he also had something for them, since they said that they did not have the resources of a noble house. He handed Todd his spellbook and said that they now had those resources. Todd opened the grimoire and exclaimed with delight that it contained the Linwick runes, and if this was a joke, it wasn't funny. Noah swore that this was not a joke and he would do everything he could to help them. Isabel suggested that his family would kill him for spreading her secrets, and Todd added that now he and Isabel could get their hands on the great runes. Noah replied that if the family didn't find out, it would be fine. He expected them both to replace one of their lesser runes with a greater rune by the next lesson. Todd was happy and said that their teacher was the best, and Isabel asked why he always took risks for them. Noah, in turn, asked the girl how this was different from a student receiving a shield from his teacher, and Isabel replied that usually the families themselves pay for them. Noah told his students that he had to go now, and when they were done, they should just put the grimoire in his desk drawer, and if anyone asked, they should say that he simply forgot it there. Noah said goodbye and took off on the flying sword, and Todd noticed that something was wrong with their teacher, and Isabel added that if his family didn't kill him, the flying sword would handle it itself. Building A was very different from Building G in its cleanliness and order. There, Vermila saw Moxie and asked what he was doing there. Noah replied that he was here to watch her teach. He wanted to learn from her because he had been slacking off too much from work. and it was time for him to learn the necessary materials so that he could teach his students as well. Moxie admitted that she had heard that he was crazy, although crazy didn't seem to be anywhere near the description of his condition. But she would let him sit in on the class as long as he didn't interrupt. A student named Emily entered the classroom and Moxie asked her to ignore the guest who would be sitting in on the same lesson. The girl agreed and asked the teacher, "Does that mean they will study runes again?" Moxie replied that they needed to discuss her final exam today. It wasn't a good picture, and she had responsibilities to the Taurans. Emily noticed that the test was just boring nonsense. Moxie corrected the girl and said that this was important nonsense and understanding of others. That's what allows her to behave properly as a noblewoman. Moxie asked Emily to try harder, and the first question was an essay on who can use runes, and she only wrote one sentence, but even that was better than her answer to the second question, which she left blank. The girl replied that the second question was about combining runes, and if she needed a new one, she would just ask her grandmother. Moxie agreed with Emily, but said that this could not be the answer. Moxie got angry and said that she gave her an easy question and Emily still got it wrong. How could she forget one of the four great families by only writing three? King, Heron, and Tauren. As disgusting as the Linwicks are, they are still one of the great families. Emily reminded them that they were their enemies, and Moxie said that she should learn more about them all the more, since a noble's duties were not limited to runes. Noah realized that the entire family hated the Linwicks, and maybe Vermil wasn't the only one who was trash. He noticed that this girl didn't have half the tenacity that Todd and Isabel had. She was handed the whole world on a platter and she didn't care. It only confirmed his decision to give his students access to the Linvick runes. They deserved it. When the lesson was over, Moxie asked Vermil why he was still here. He replied that he was just thinking and thanked the girl for letting him sit in on the lesson, and that it was educational. To the girl's surprised look, he replied that he meant that it was interesting to look at everything from a different angle. Moxie replied that she was glad she could help him, and maybe she used the wrong word earlier, calling him crazy. Maybe he had gotten better. Noah, looking after this girl, thought that he even seemed to like her. As he was leaving the classroom, he ran into two men who rudely told him to watch his step. Noah apologized, and Magus Allen told Edward not to waste his time on this disgrace, because they had already spent too much on it. Noah thought that the man's phrase sounded as if he specifically wanted to hurt him personally. It seemed that these two people knew Vermil, and he could not delay any longer. He needed to find out Vermil's connections before one of them stabbed him in the back.